Have you ever been in a situation where someone's cruel words cut so deep that you were left speechless? Where the person you least expected came to your defense in the most powerful way possible? That's exactly what happened to me last Thanksgiving. And what my 8-year-old daughter said next left everyone at that dinner table completely stunned. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how one family dinner changed everything. How my mother-in-law's harsh words backfired in ways she never saw coming, and how my little girl showed more courage than any adult in that room. But before I tell you what happened, let me paint you a picture of the relationship I've had with Margaret, my mother-in-law, for the past 12 years. Because what you're about to hear isn't just about one dinner. It's about years of passive-aggressive comments, subtle undermining, and a woman who never thought I was good enough for her precious son. CTA 1. If you're someone who's dealt with difficult family dynamics or toxic in-laws, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. These kinds of stories need to be shared, and your support helps me bring you more real-life experiences every week. Also, give this video a thumbs up if you're ready to hear how an 8-year-old completely changed the game at our family dinner. It all started 12 years ago when I first met David, my now husband. I was 23, fresh out of college, working as a kindergarten teacher in a small town in Ohio. David was this charming, funny guy who worked at the local bank. We met at a coffee shop. Cliché, I know. But there was something about his smile that just drew me in. Our relationship moved pretty quickly. Within 6 months, we were talking about moving in together, and that's when I first met Margaret. I'll never forget that first meeting. David had built it up so much, telling me how excited his mom was to meet me, how she'd been asking about me for weeks. I spent hours picking out the perfect outfit. Not too casual, not too formal. I brought homemade cookies, her favorite flowers, and I practiced conversation topics in my car before walking up to their front door. Margaret opened the door, looked me up and down with this cold smile, and said, "So you're the girl David's been wasting his time with." Not, "It's nice to meet you," or "David's told me so much about you." No. Wasting his time. David laughed it off, said his mom was just being protective. But I saw something in her eyes that day. Something calculating, dismissive. Like she'd already decided I wasn't worth her time or energy. Over the years, it only got worse. When David proposed, Margaret made comments about how rushed everything was. When we got married, she wore black to the wedding, claimed it was her only nice dress, but I knew better. When our daughter Emma was born, Margaret made it clear that while she loved her granddaughter, she had concerns about my parenting abilities. Every family gathering was a minefield. Margaret had this way of making cutting remarks that sounded almost innocent if you weren't paying attention. "Oh, Sarah's working again this weekend? I suppose someone has to pay the bills while David focuses on his career." Or, "Emma, sweetheart, let Grandma teach you the proper way to set a table since Mommy doesn't seem to know." David, bless him, would sometimes defend me, but Margaret had perfected the art of making her attacks seem so subtle that calling her out made me look oversensitive. "I was just offering to help," she'd say with wounded innocence. "I didn't mean anything by it." But Emma, my bright, perceptive 8-year-old Emma, she saw everything. She noticed how Grandma Margaret's voice changed when she talked to me, versus when she talked to Daddy. She picked up on the way Margaret would cut me off mid-sentence, or ignore my contributions to conversations. Emma was watching, learning, and quietly forming her own opinions about her grandmother's behavior. This past Thanksgiving, Margaret insisted on hosting at her house, as she had for the past 12 years. It was always her way of maintaining control. Her house, her rules, her show. David's sister Linda would be there with her husband and their twin boys, plus David's Uncle Ray and his girlfriend Diane. I spent weeks preparing. I made my famous sweet potato casserole, Emma's favorite green bean dish, and a pumpkin pie from scratch. I bought Margaret a beautiful autumn bouquet and a bottle of that expensive wine she always talked about but never bought for herself. I was determined to make this dinner different, to finally bridge whatever gap existed between us. Emma was excited too. She'd been working on a special drawing for Grandma Margaret, a picture of our whole family together with a turkey in the middle. She'd spent hours on it, carefully coloring each person and writing Happy Thanksgiving in her best cursive at the top. We arrived right on time, 6 p.m. sharp, just as Margaret had requested. The house smelled amazing, filled with the scents of roasted turkey, stuffing, and cinnamon. For a moment, I let myself hope this might actually be a pleasant evening. Margaret greeted David with a warm hug, swept Emma into her arms with genuine joy, and then turned to me with that familiar tight smile. "Sarah," she said coolly, taking my offerings without much acknowledgement. "I suppose you can put those in the kitchen. The evening started well enough." Uncle Ray was telling funny stories about his retirement adventures. The twins were being relatively well behaved, and Emma was charming everyone with her questions about their jobs and hobbies. I found myself relaxing, actually enjoying the conversation. But I should have known better. Margaret was just biding her time. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to remind you to hit that like button if you're enjoying this story. And definitely leave a comment below telling me about your own experiences with difficult family members. Sometimes sharing these stories helps us all feel less alone. Now back to that dinner table, where everything was about to change. About an hour into dinner, we were all seated around Margaret's formal dining table. The good china was out, the candles were lit, and everyone was digging into the feast. Emma was telling everyone about her school play, where she was going to be a pilgrim, when Margaret suddenly shifted the conversation. "You know," Margaret said, setting down her fork and looking directly at me. "I've been thinking a lot lately about family traditions and what they really mean." David looked up, a slight warning in his eyes. He'd learned to recognize that tone in his mother's voice, the one that meant trouble was coming. "Family traditions," Margaret continued, "are about blood, about history, about connections that go back generations. They're about people who truly belong together, who share something deeper than just convenience or circumstance." I felt my stomach drop, but I tried to keep my voice light. "That's true, Margaret. It's wonderful how your family has maintained so many beautiful traditions over the years." Margaret smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Exactly, which is why I think it's important to be honest about who really belongs in those traditions, and who doesn't." The table grew quiet. Linda stopped cutting her turkey. Uncle Ray's girlfriend Diane looked uncomfortable. David's jaw was tightening in that way it did when he was trying to control his temper. "Mom," David said carefully, "what are you trying to say?" Margaret took a sip of her wine, clearly savoring the moment. "I'm just saying that some people fit naturally into a family and others never quite manage it, no matter how hard they try. Some people will always be outsiders looking in." She looked directly at me as she said this, making sure everyone understood exactly who she was talking about. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but before I could respond, Emma piped up from her seat next to me. "Grandma Margaret, what's an outsider?" Margaret's expression softened as she turned to Emma. "Oh, sweetheart, it's just someone who doesn't really belong with a group of people. Someone who might be around, but isn't really part of the family." Emma looked confused, glancing between Margaret and me. "But Mommy is part of our family. She's my mommy." Margaret leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on that sickeningly sweet tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "Of course, darling. But sometimes adults understand things differently than children do. Sometimes being married to someone doesn't automatically make you part of their family. Sometimes..." And that's when she said it. The words that would change everything. Margaret looked right at me, her voice clear and deliberate. "Sometimes you Have to accept that you'll never be part of this family, no matter how long you stick around. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I'd been slapped. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of trying to win this woman's approval. 12 years of biting my tongue and making excuses for her behavior. And this was what it came down to. I opened my mouth to respond, to finally say something, to stand up for myself after all these years. But before I could get a word out, Emma's small but clear voice cut through the tension. "That's not true, Grandma Margaret." Everyone turned to look at my 8-year-old daughter, who was sitting up straight in her chair, her little face serious and determined. "Emma, honey," David started to say, but Emma held up her small hand. "No, Daddy, Grandma Margaret is wrong." What happened next still gives me chills when I think about it. My 8-year-old daughter, this little person who usually giggled at fart jokes and worried about whether her socks matched, suddenly displayed more wisdom and courage than any adult at that table. Emma looked directly at Margaret, her young voice steady and clear. "Grandma Margaret, Mommy is the most part of our family of anyone. She's the one who makes sure Daddy eats breakfast before work because he always forgets. She's the one who remembers everyone's birthdays and buys all the presents that say they're from Daddy. She's the one who stayed up all night when Daddy had the flu, bringing him soup and medicine." Margaret's confident smile began to falter, but Emma wasn't finished. "She's the one who taught me how to ride my bike when Daddy was too scared I'd get hurt. She's the one who comes to every single one of my school events, even when she has to leave work early. She helps me with my homework every night, and she reads me stories even when she's really tired." Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "She's the one who makes our house feel happy and safe. She's the one who fixes things when they're broken and hugs us when we're sad. She remembers what everyone likes to eat and always makes sure we have our favorite things." I felt tears starting to form in my eyes, but Emma still wasn't done. "And you know what else, Grandma Margaret? Mommy is the one who always defends you when people say mean things about you." This caught Margaret completely off guard. "What do you mean?" Emma tilted her head, as if surprised she had to explain. "Like when Mrs. Henderson from down the street said you were cranky and hard to deal with. Mommy said that wasn't fair and that you were just protective of your family. Or when Daddy gets frustrated with you sometimes, Mommy always tells him to be patient because you love us, and you're just showing it in your own way." The table was completely silent now. David was staring at Emma with a mixture of pride and amazement. Linda had tears in her eyes. Uncle Ray was nodding slowly. Even the twins had stopped eating and were listening intently. But Emma wasn't finished, delivering her devastating 8-year-old truth bomb. "So if someone who does all of that isn't part of the family, then I don't understand what family means. Because if Mommy isn't part of our family, then I don't want to be part of it either." Margaret's face had gone completely white. The woman, who always had a cutting remark ready, who never seemed at a loss for words, was sitting there speechless. Emma turned to me then, her little hand reaching for mine. "Mommy, you're the best part of our family. And if Grandma Margaret can't see that, then maybe she's the one who doesn't understand what family really means." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I squeezed Emma's hand too, emotional to speak. David was looking at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Finally, Linda broke the silence. "Emma's right," she said quietly. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. We all do. You've been nothing but kind and patient with all of us, and especially with Mom. Even when..." She glanced at Margaret, then back to me. "Even when it wasn't deserved." What happened after Emma's speech was unlike anything I'd ever experienced at a family gathering. Uncle Ray cleared his throat and said, "That little girl just taught all of us adults a lesson about what really matters." Diane nodded in agreement, wiping her eyes. Margaret sat there for a long moment, staring at her plate. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red. "Emma," she said softly, "you're absolutely right. held my breath, not sure what was coming next. Margaret turned to me, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw genuine vulnerability in her expression. "Sarah, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. Emma just made me realize what a terrible mistake I've been making all these years." She took a shaky breath. "I was so afraid of losing David, of not being the most important woman in his life anymore, that I turned you into an enemy instead of embracing you as a daughter. I've wasted 12 years being jealous and cruel when I should have been grateful that my son found someone who loves him and our family as much as you do." The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. "Margaret, No, let me finish," she said. "Emma's right about everything. You are the heart of this family. You hold everyone together. You remember everything important. You show up for everyone. And instead of appreciating that, I've spent years trying to make you feel unwelcome in your own family." She stood up from her chair and came around the table to where I was sitting. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry for all the cruel comments, for all the ways I've tried to exclude you, for making you feel like you had to prove yourself worthy of love you always deserved just for being you." Margaret looked at Emma then. "And thank you, sweetheart, for being brave enough to tell the truth when all the adults were too scared to say what needed to be said." Emma beamed at her grandmother. "Does this mean you're going to be nicer to Mommy now?" Margaret laughed through her tears. "Yes, honey. It means Grandma is going to try very hard to be the grandmother and mother-in-law that you and your mommy deserve." The rest of that evening was different from any family dinner we'd ever had. Margaret asked me about my work, actually listened to my answers, and even asked for my sweet potato casserole recipe. For the first time in 12 years, I felt like I could breathe freely in her house. And that's how my 8-year-old daughter completely changed our family dynamic with nothing but honesty and love. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about family, relationships, and the unexpected moments that change everything. And let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a child show you a truth that adults were too afraid to face? Sometimes it takes the innocent wisdom of a child to cut through years of hurt and misunderstanding. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the most truth. And sometimes the best defense comes from the person who loves you most, even if they're only 8 years old. Thanks for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.